Get wrecked, nerd! Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brain Blaze. Today, things Canadians think are normal but others find bizarre.
Oh, Canada!
Canadians are like, is there anything Canadians find unusual? Canadians be like, they're just be like getting on with their Canadian ways, doing everything nice and normal. Canadians are just like the friendliest people. There's nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong with Canadians. Love Canada.
Canada loves you back.
It's written by Kevin, it's read by me. I'm going to react to it, never read it before. You're going to enjoy this with me, dear audience, hopefully. Unless you're Canadian, then maybe you'll get wildly offended and go on some sort of terrorist rampage. But you probably wouldn't, because you're Canadian.
The following program is a presentation of the Provincial Educational Media Center.
I'm always happy when I see a series like this continue to do well, not because I'm creatively bankrupt and it saves me the trouble of thinking of new ideas. That's why I like it, Kevin, if I'm absolutely honest, because it's like, oh, you know what, I could do like 5 new ideas on this, and then that's 5 new ideas that I don't have to creatively come up with. Nice. But because I find this topic particularly interesting and fun to write about, oh, Kevin, if only I found it interesting to read about. No, I do. I do like these, and it's nice that they do well. Of course, if we ever reach a point where I'm writing about things Uruguayans think are normal but others find bizarre, then you'll know that I am creatively bankrupt. But since Canada shares a border with the United States, Canada holds a special place in America's heart. We see them as our friendly neighbor to the north, and often as America Junior, our little kid brother that wishes that they were as cool as us. I once saw a poster, and it said, like, how Americans saw the world, and Canada was just labeled as America's hat. I thought this was really funny. And like Florida, maybe America's penis. Though this runs counter to the views of large areas of Europe that view Canada as the United States but better. However, despite most Americans having a favourable view of Canada, we don't actually know anything about the people or its country. My view of Canada is probably like, it's like America, but like more chill and nicer and less successful. It's kind of like, right? Because like America I see is like, oh, it's big, it's powerful, it's rich. And Canada's like big and powerful and rich. But like, it's kind of like if you had 2 brothers and one of them is like really successful and the other one's just like, well, he's got like a regular ass job. You know, like one of them's Elon Musk and the other one's his brother. I can't remember his brother's name, so let's just call him Bob Musk. And Bob Musk is successful in his own way. He's like, I don't know, maybe he's a lawyer or something. And he's just doing great. But he's not Elon Musk. But he's probably a lot nicer. You'd probably rather hang out with him. That kind of stuff. That's Canada, in my mind. One of the people I play Magic with is Canadian, and he revealed something recently that was completely shocking to me, even though I definitely should have already known it. Canada's population is only 38 million people. Their country has a larger landmass than the United States, but somehow they only have 11% as many people. It's really cold in Canada, that's why. I once knew a guy from Winnipeg. And he said, like, he found it quite offensive, or, like, he was just like, he didn't find it funny when people called his hometown Winterpeg. And then everyone started calling him hometown Winterpeg, because of course they did. Granted, you wouldn't want to live on a lot of that land, as it does get entirely too cold, but I'm still shocked that the population is so low. So today, we'll be looking at other things. Is Elon Musk's brother's name Errol?
No.
Or is that his dad? Oh, that's his dad, isn't it? What's his fucking brother's name? Does it begin with an E as well?
No.
Elvin Musk? Elon Musk? Elvin? Errol? Edward? Fuck. Ah! I feel like his name's less weird, but still a little bit weird. Oh, it doesn't matter. Let's just carry on. So today we're going to be looking at other things that Canadians think are normal, that others find bizarre or shocking, and that us Americans, not me, Kevin, that would be you, I really should have known about, but almost certainly didn't. Strategic reserves. Oh, is this about them having, like, strategic reserve of maple syrup? Like, they have an extraordinary amount of maple syrup just tucked away to control the market or something weird like that. It's important for a nation to keep strategic reserves of vital resources and commodities to protect the national interest. In the United States, that includes things like oil, helium, and nuclear warheads. But for Canada, it means maple syrup.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
Maple syrup can only be produced in North America because of the specific climate that it requires, and that production all takes place in the north. There are a few things. Like, this is a very boring tangent. It's like how Simon thinks of hotels. When I go to a hotel, there are two things that allow me to rate the hotel. Like, besides everything else, you know, there's like two things which are really important to me. When you go down to breakfast, and if they have the little pancake station or one of those fancy machines that makes the pancakes or whatever, and then next to it, there'll be like a bottle of maple syrup. And sometimes it's like real maple syrup, and sometimes it's like some fake high fructose bullshit maple syrup flavored stuff. And I'm like, if that is the bullshit maple syrup flavored stuff, this is a bad hotel. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And on the other side of that is juice. Like, if they have like juice that's concentrate, you know, from concentrate that kind of has that weird taste to it, or if they have freshly squeezed juice. If they're freshly squeezed juice, I'm like, because I've stayed in some really nice hotels, and you go down for breakfast, and it's just like, what the fuck is this? You don't have freshly squeezed juice. How much is this place again? Like, what the fuck? And if you live in somewhere that can produce proper maple syrup, that shit is serious business. Even as an American living in the Northeast, it'll be a cold day in hell before I ever use Aunt Jemima on my pancakes. What the fuck is Aunt Jemima? I don't care if it costs 4 times as much for a bottle half its size. It's genuine maple syrup or nothing. Is Aunt Jemima's that high fructose full bullshit that I was talking about?
Correct.
But even as fervent as those of us in the northern US might get about maple syrup, it's nothing compared to how Canadians feel about it. Maple syrup is an important and valuable commodity, so important that the Quebec maple syrup producers, a government-sponsored cartel, founded the world's first maple syrup strategic reserve to regulate the supply and thus price in years when nature caused production to fall. It's unclear exactly how much is being stored in the reserve at any given moment, but they are capable of storing up to 55 million pounds of syrup, which is a lot. It's so much that you could probably steal almost 10,000 barrels of the stuff and nobody would notice. At least that was the theory behind the great Canadian maple syrup heist, a topic Simon has covered on The Casual Criminalist. Yes, one of the few Casual Criminalist episodes where someone doesn't get horrifically murdered, which is a nice break but rarely gets any views, so I tend to just focus on where people have their hearts eaten by horrible monsters who are now in prison or dead. Yay! The story version is that thieves siphoned $14 million worth of syrup from the facility before anybody noticed. While I definitely appreciate the love of maple syrup, Canadians take it much further than I ever could dream of.
That's the 3rd time this month. I'm gonna have to write you up for contraband. Can't you just give me a warning? Sorry.
You've heard of cucumber water, but why not grab yourself a bottle of delicious maple water? Or if you want a sweet snack in the winter, you can always make yourself some maple taffy. What is taffy, by the way? I only know of that from Friends, where, is it Ross who's like eating that saltwater taffy or something? But I don't know what it is. This is made by boiling maple syrup, pouring it over virgin snow, and then shoving a stick through it. As the molten syrup cools in the snow, it will harden, and then you can pull the stick out and enjoy a nice lollipop made of maple syrup. In one of the most Canadian sentences ever, Stanley Cup winner Yanni Gourde made maple syrup taffy inside the trophy in his hometown in Quebec back in 2021. What the f*** is going on? Simon, if you weren't sure, the Stanley Cup is for hockey. Oh, I just was reading this assuming it was golf.
What?
I don't know why. It's probably because someone called Stanley. Stanley is the most golf name I've ever heard. It's like, if you go to a golf course and ask people their name, half the people there are probably called Stanley. Bagged milk. Bagged milk is weird. Where did I go recently that had bagged milk? Bagged milk? I don't remember. I definitely went somewhere where they had bagged milk, and they have like these plastic containers, and you put the bag of milk in there and you snip off the top and then it pours out. Like, it's actually a genius idea. Where the fuck was this?
Canada?
It was recently. But I feel like I haven't been anywhere recently. When it comes time to make your grocery list, there are some common items you might need to pick up at the store that we can all agree are pretty universal. You might need to grab a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, and of course, 4 bags of milk. While this was once extremely common across all of Canada, it seems to be mostly relegated to the eastern side of the country these days. So why bagged milk? Well, isn't it better? Like, better than the environment, better for storage, that kind of stuff? Because if you've got like a big plastic bottle, that's a lot of hard plastic and stuff that then has to be thrown away. Glass is like a thing of the past, right? People don't have glass milk bottles. We're not insane. I guess it would be actually kind of efficient to have glass milk bottles because that's much more recyclable, isn't it? But we got rid of that. Like, we had glass milk bottles when I was a boy. But not anymore, because there's no milkman driving around on his electric milk float. Anyone else remember that? Is that just a British thing? It's fucking weird. Like, you'd have the postman and the milkman. And sometimes the milkman would have juice. Not good juice, like weird from concentrate juice. So why bagged milk? Why couldn't they just use jugs and bottles like the rest of the civilized world? The answer is actually mostly because of the metric system. When Canada switched from the imperial system to the metric system, they wanted to do a complete overhaul as quickly as possible. That meant no more buying milk by the gallon or the pound. It was going to be sold by the litre. Well, I live in a country where it's on the metric system, and it's all sold by the litre, and we don't have it in bags, we have it in cartons. Or bottles. The issue was that companies were already producing gallon-and-a-half jugs for milk, and making entirely new sizes was going to take them some time. However, there was one company that had begun selling milk in bags shortly before this happened. At the time, it was still common to get milk delivered in glass bottles that were washed and reused, but these bottles were heavy, took time to clean, and were breakable. Bags were a cheap, lightweight solution to this problem, and one that could be resized to fit metric measurements nationwide pretty quickly. If you ask a Canadian why they buy their milk in bags, you're likely to only get one of two responses. Let me guess, one of them's environmental. Either they'll tell you that they don't, and only the other side of the country does that, or they get extremely defensive about their bagged milk. Okay, never mind. Apparently bagged milk's like a big thing for you Canadians. You don't want to talk about the environment. You just want to talk about your, yes! Why do you love bagged milk? I just do! It can escalate pretty quickly too. I've seen a conversation jump immediately from why do Canadians buy milk in bags to why do Americans carry loaded guns into Walmart? Both very valid questions. Of course, many Canadians will tell you how much better bagged milk is than the jugs the rest of us use. One bag of milk will contain 4 smaller bags that are only 1 litre each, allowing the rest of the milk to remain sealed and ideally fresh for longer. Why don't, just buy milk in 1 litre boxes? Like, we just have cartons. Isn't that just like the best of both worlds? You don't have to fiddle around with a weird ass bag, and it's also remains fresh for longer because it's sealed in 1 litre increments. I'm sure it's horrible for the environment, but who cares? They also claim that they're more eco-friendly, as there's much less plastic involved and the high-density polyethylene bags are easily recyclable. It's also much cheaper to store a few small, malleable bags in your fridge than a rigid 1-gallon jug. Is it? Is it cheaper? Oh, it's easier. Why did I read that as cheaper?
Professionalism.
True. Is it easier, though? A bag just rolling around in there is going to be I don't want that. I just want the milk just standing up in the why the fuck can't I remember the word door?
I'm having a stroke up here.
Door of the fridge just standing there like a normal carton of milk. What's the problem? True as this all may be, it is still weird. The plastic bags also require having a separate container to store the open bags in, making it questionable whether they actually save that much space. And since the bags aren't resealable and need to be cut open, it's likely that the milk will spoil much faster. But again, Canadians will counter this by saying that you're only opening 1 litre at a time rather than a whole gallon, and having the already open bag just encourages people to drink it faster. That doesn't sound very healthy, does it? It's why do you drink that whole bottle of wine last night? Well, I didn't have the stopper to put back in, so I just had to drink it all. It's better that way. An island getaway. When you think of planning a vacation to the Caribbean, there are a few places that likely jump to mind. Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, and Aruba are among the most popular destinations, but it is the largest Caribbean islands that Canadians make their winter destination. Cuba.
All right. Cuba.
Cuba obviously receives tourists from other countries as well, but over 30% of all tourists to Cuba are Canadian, totaling about 1.2 million tourists per year. Whoa! I went to Cuba a few years ago. It's super interesting. The food sucked. No offense, Cuba, but your food is very repetitive. Beautiful place. Really nice. But dude, if I ate another fried chicken, and I love fried chicken, or beans and rice or whatever it was, I was going to lose my mind. I was like, oh my god, I need something else. It's really hard. Oh, boo-hoo, Simon. Your vacation in Cuba was so miserable. Totaling about 1.2 million tourists per year. In case you already forgot the number I said earlier, that's roughly 3.5% of Canada's entire population. Not only are there plenty of other options within the Caribbean, there's a great big world out there that people can travel to. There are also plenty of people who would rather just stay at home. To be fair, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that 3% of Americans living in the north vacation in Florida for the winter, so the amount of people wanting to get away makes sense. It just seems so strange to me. Not only would Canadians seemingly universally choose the same island getaway, but that the island in question would be Cuba, which I don't think Americans can go to, right? When I was in Cuba, I think was it Obama who had just lifted like the embargo on Cuba or something, but then it was back on, and so there was this short pocket of time when Americans could visit Cuba. And when I was there were Americans there, and it's like, how do you feel about this? And it's crazy, right? Cuba. And I'm like, yeah, crazy. Cuba. Then again, maybe this is something that only seems so strange specifically because I'm an American. It does, Kevin! After all, we're not actually allowed to vacation in Cuba. There are about a dozen approved reasons that Americans can travel to Cuba, but we're not allowed to go there specifically for tourism purposes. If an American has another reason to be in Cuba, they can still go to the beach, but that can't be the entire reason they showed up. So why are you going to Cuba? Business? So, of all the Caribbean islands, why Cuba? It seems to have really started in the 1970s, and according to Canadians, there are a couple of reasons for it. First and foremost is the price. The flights and accommodations are cheaper than any of the other islands that we more closely associate with tourism, and they view it as a great last-minute destination to escape the cold. Is there a giant blizzard about to hit up your province? Quick, hop on a plane and wait out the storm in Cuba. But there's another reason that is much simpler, and that's because they see the people there as being really nice. If you're staying in a touristy area, then I'm sure it's in their best interest to be nice so that you'll pump money into their economy, but the other tourists are all really nice too because all of the other tourists are Canadian.
I can proudly sew my country's flag on my backpack.
If they traveled to another island, they might have to deal with a bunch of rude, boorish Europeans pushing past them. Yes, they might have to. I understand you Canadians. Yeah, I get it. I'm with you. Even though I'm probably one of those boorish Europeans. I like it, you're right. Or even worse, they might have to deal with Americans. Don't even go there. And that brings us to perhaps the most iconic aspect of being Canadian. Sorry. As we previously discussed on this channel, Americans are often perceived as being overly friendly and chatty. You're right, Kevin, because you are. Or, like, one of the most... I don't even know how to describe it. Like, you go to America, everyone talks to you. Like, you'll be standing in a lift. Just check into a hotel, you go up to your room, and someone will come into the lift and they'll be like, afternoon, beautiful day we're having, isn't it? And I'm like, yes, it is! Have we met? However, many view this as us being fake nice, which isn't entirely wrong. Like we covered before, when an American asks, how are you? We don't actually want to know. Canadians, on the other hand, are known for being genuinely friendly, polite, and helpful. There is this global stereotype that Canadians are some of the nicest people in the world. Most Canadians I've met are very nice. There's a stereotype for a reason. Though much of what's perceived as niceness may actually just be politeness, and there is no single word that better encapsulates how polite Canadians are than sorry.
I'm sorry.
I am so sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Well, I feel like British people are also very polite, but we'll let you, like, we're polite and we'll also let you know that we don't like you. We'll just be like, oh, please, after you. Which, like, I didn't say that right. It's hard to encapsulate this, but it's like, we'll be polite, but you know we don't like you. That's the British way. In Canada, people apologize for everything all of the time. Customers at a restaurant will say sorry while ordering their food as if they are somehow inconveniencing the waitstaff by requesting that they do their job. A cyclist could nearly be run over by a truck and yell, sorry, back at the driver. Even advertisements are full of apologies, with one ad I saw reading, sorry, available for a limited time only. We could argue about whether or not Canadians are actually friendly or if they're just polite and passive-aggressive. Passive-aggressive, that's the British word I was looking for. But there's no denying that their non-stop need to apologize. Sorry about stumbling over my words there. This is another thing they tend to get defensive about as well, questioning why others aren't apologizing just as much as they do. And I have to agree with them. I suspect I say sorry on a daily basis as much as your average Canadian, usually when I haven't actually done anything wrong. It's just the polite thing to do. Yeah, I also find myself apologizing a lot. And I wish I don't know, I guess it's fine because it is polite, I guess, but I'm not sorry for that. Like, what am I saying I am? I would question myself afterwards and be like, what's wrong with you, Whistle?
So many things.
If I'm in the bank lobby waiting to fill out a deposit slip and the person next to me and I both reach for the pen at the same time, of course I'm going to say sorry. What else am I supposed to do in that situation? Kick them to the ground, grab the pen and yell, get wrecked, nerd! I'm going to side with Canada on this one and say that I don't understand why apologizing all the time comes off as so weird, but considering how other Americans react, often getting angry about it, I'm going to say that I'm very much in the minority of Americans on this one. However, saying sorry all the time was actually in danger of becoming a real legal problem in Canada. I have to believe that this is really America's fault for being a bad influence on our neighbor, but some people sought to use the constant apologies against people. Is this like one of those things like, if you have a car accident, you're always told, even if it's your fault, don't get out and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. Because then they'll be like, yes, that's admitting it. After all, if you're saying sorry to someone, aren't you admitting personal fault? In reality, that's not necessarily the case. Okay, it's just an urban legend then. But there were plenty of lawyers that were willing to argue that it was. As a result, Ontario drew a lot of media attention when they passed the Apology Act of 2009. Is that really a thing? This law stated that a person making an apology is not making an admission of their guilt. It's a completely sensible law, and other provinces already had similar laws. In fact, a number of US states have laws like that as well, as they should. Considering the law seems to acknowledge that these apologies are acceptable behavior, maybe Canadians aren't the weird ones here. Maybe you're just all assholes. Poutine. I've never had poutine. There's a place that serves poutine.
Its name is Poutine.
Really close to my house, but I've never been there to have it. And there's another one. I don't know why. There's two, poutine places that I know about.
Poutine.
I've never had it. I should. It's just chips with gravy, right? Chips with gravy, is that poutine?
Poutine.
Oh, never mind.
It's called poutine. I can't let's see. When I was in middle school, we got a new transfer student from the exotic, far-off land of Quebec. One day before class, she mentioned that her favourite food was poutine, and she was shocked to discover that not a single other person in the room had ever heard of it. Poutine is such a purely Canadian dish that the spell check in my copy of MS Word 2007. You can't be serious, Kevin. This is not even a real word. The dish is often referred to as the national food of Canada, though it doesn't actually hold that title. In fact, some Quebecois believe that other Canadians referring to poutine as the national food is cultural appropriation, but I'll let them fight about that themselves. So, for those of you who don't know what actually is poutine, by this point Simon's probably already explained it, but it's simply a dish of French fries, brown gravy, usually beef gravy, boom, got it right, and cheese curds. Didn't know that? Cheese curds on top, huh? We have chips and gravy in the UK. It's like a thing that northern people eat sometimes, perhaps when they're drunk. If you've never heard of it before, your initial reaction is probably to think that it sounds disgusting. I mean, I'd try it. I've never had it. I've never had chips with gravy because I've never been to the north. Just joking. Of course I've been to the north, but I've never had chips with gravy. Does sound kind of gross.
How dare you?
This isn't aided by the fact that the cheese curds are consumed almost exclusively in Canada and very northern areas of the United States, and to those who have never tried them, they sound unappealing. I mean, at some point in your life, there must have been curdled milk in your fridge, and that is one of the most immediately offensive smells in the world. Oh God, I bought milk from a store the other day. It was one of these, fancy farm stores run by a hipster. And I'm sure it's like some weird unpasteurized milk or whatever. And I'm like, cool, just buy some milk, because it was just the closest store that I was by. And I go back to my office and I'm making some coffee. I pour this milk into my coffee and I'm like, oh wow, this thick milk. It's like this farmer's good milk, where it's got that cream on top and stuff. And then I'm like, sit down, take a big swig of my coffee. And I'm like, no! And it wasn't thick with cream. It was thick with board curdled off milk. It was disgusting. And gravy on French fries? Gross. That's what ketchup is for. And I don't think the Canadians would even dispute that ketchup goes great on fries, since in Canada you can buy bags of ketchup-flavored potato chips. You can in the UK as well. They taste weird. But ketchup is not their first choice. Anyway, what I described is a lot of people's initial gut reaction to hearing what poutine actually is, but let's examine it intellectually for a moment. Okay, then. French fries are just cut up potatoes, and people put gravy on potatoes all the time. Cheese is a common topping for loaded baked potato skins as well. I suspect that the real hang-up for people is that it specifically uses cheese curds, which don't sound particularly appetizing. Of course, this ignores the fact that all cheese is made from curdled milk. If people are willing to pay $100 per pound for illegal maggot-infested cheese that could make them sick, surely you can indulge in a bit of regular old cheese that's just in serious need of rebranding. Poutine was originally created back in the 1950s, and it became popular at cheap diners, bars, and hockey arenas. It quickly rose in popularity, even being served across Canada by fast food chains like Burger King. It's often regarded as the ultimate comfort food, but it's not just a lowbrow dining option for plebs. Gourmet chefs have created sophisticated and, more importantly, expensive variations on the dish. For example, maybe you'd like your poutine prepared to include caviar, truffles, or foie gras.
I swear on the ghost of John A. MacDonald that we are going to find out who did this to you, and when we do, we are going to file a formal complaint.
Yes, I would.
Sus mon Québec.
I'd personally recommend against that, but I'm not your dad, so you can do whatever you want. And Okay. And in another extremely Canadian sentence, a couple of days after Yanni Gourde ate maple taffy out of the Stanley Cup, his teammate Matthew Joseph ate Poutine out of the cup. And here I was thinking that hockey players just use the Stanley Cup to drink beer. God damn, I was thinking about golf again. Kevin even explicitly told me it was hockey. But at the end of the day, Canadians and Americans really aren't that different from one another. And honestly, why would they be? Here's another little fact that Americans should probably all know, but I only learned just now. Canada is nearly 3,000 miles tall, but 90% of the nation's population lives within 100 miles of the US border. Oh my god. It makes sense then, at least for Americans, that 90% of Canadians shouldn't come across as that bizarre. It's the other 10% that are the real fucking weirdos. And that's where we end today's video. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time. Thank you, Kevin, for writing it. Yes! Why do you love bad milk? I just do!